السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. We continue inshallah ta'ala with الروض المربع and in كتاب الزكاة in the chapter of الزكاة, and we stopped in the bottom of page 510 where he says والخامس مضي الحول. والخامس مضي الحول. Uh, and this is in the conditions for the zakah, and he mentioned the four before, which is the zakah becomes wajib, and these are shurut wujub al-zakah. We talked about the hurriya wa islam wa milku nisab wa istiqraruhu, and the fifth one مضي الحول. So he says here والخامس مضي الحول لقول عائشة عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم لا زكاة في مال حتى يحول عليه الحول، رواه ابن ماجه. يقول ورفقا بالمالك ليتكامل النماء فيواسي منه ويعفى فيه عن نصف يوم. We briefly talked about this before last time, but just to repeat it inshallah ta'ala. So this is the fifth condition from the conditions of wujub az-zakah. The zakah becomes obligatory upon the person, which is mudi al-hawl. Mudi is when something passes, and al-hawl here is the year when it passes on the ownership of the wealth. So as they call it dawaran al-sana, when the whole year passes on. And that's of course refers to the Hijri year. To the Hijri year. So he says مضي الحول لقول عائشة عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم, because Aisha رضي الله عنها, she said that the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم said لا زكاة في مال حتى يحول عليه الحول. There's no zakah in wealth unless a whole حول, a year passes on, returns back to the year. That means a whole year passes. And this is, as he mentioned here, وَرِفْقًا بِالْمَالِكِ. It was mentioned this is part of the ta'leel, or why the wisdom behind this is to the gentleness to the owner of the money. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he mentioned the human beings, and he said, وَإِنَّهُ لِحُبِّ الْخَيْرِ لَشَدِيدٌ. Indeed, that the human beings, when it comes to the love of wealth, he is shadid, he is intense in the way that he loves wealth. So to make it easy for the owner of the wealth is to keep him for a year, where is, as they say, رفقا بالمالك ليتكامل النماء. النماء is the increase. So for the increase of the wealth to become completed, because as also it gives the meaning that az-zakah is only obligatory in the wealth that is فيه النماء, right? So the wealth has to be, and that's what when we talk about al-amwal az-zakawiyya, and we talked about it in the beginning. This amwal zakawiyya, in it is something they call amwal namiyya. These are the types of wealth where the wealth increases. The nature of the wealth itself increases. It becomes something that people would invest their wealth in these types of wealth. For example, if someone has goat, cattle, sheep, and so on, then it increases. This is what they have, and it increases, produce. And the same thing when it comes to the wealth of a person, cash money or whatever. So it's meant for it to increase and to be given a whole year for it to increase. So رفقا بالمالك ليتكامل النماء فيواسي منه. So when it becomes completed, then فيواسي منه. He would make muwasah. Al-muwasah is to have this compassionate towards others. It's a word used for condolences sometimes, to make those who are in need in a good state and things like this. ويعفى فيه عن نصف يوم. نصف يوم يعفى فيه, then the hawl is a whole Hijri calendar year. If it passes that by half a day, this is to be pardoned, is to be overlooked, that means it's not a sin if a person is late for half a day. So since the hadith says لا زكاة في مال حتى يحول عليه الحول, right? So the zakah is not obligatory till the year passes. So therefore, it is not to be passed. It's not to be passed unless the zakah is given. So if it's half a day, then there's no harm. But also here with regards to an-nisab, when it comes to the minimum requirement for the wealth. So for example, if a person has the requirement amount of an-nisab for wealth that to give zakah, and that came, for example, in the beginning of Ramadan, the first day of Ramadan, right? So then the next year, if it has to stay above the nisab and above for an entire year. So if the next year, right, all the way to the day before Ramadan, which is in this case will be in Sha'ban, the 29th or the 30th of Sha'ban, right? So if the money on that day decreased than the nisab, then there is no zakah. If he purchased something with his money, an apartment or a house or whatever, not to run away from the zakah, but there's no zakah here in this case, right? This is what the normal understanding this to be. But then he says, وَيُعْفَى فِيهِ عَنْ نُصْفِ يَوْمٍ. I mean, the end of the hawl is like half a day is to be overlooked. To be overlooked, meaning it does not affect the hawl, does not affect the year. So, therefore, if the decrease is at the end of it, this is something to be overlooked. That means he would have to give zakah in this case. If it's after Asr, for example, on the 30th of Sha'ban, the money decreased from al-hawl, so we say no, you have to give zakah, because half a day is something that is to be overlooked. This is what is meant. So not, this is specifically for that, for the issue of the end of the hawl, in case if something like that happens, with the condition that there is no tricks, as they say. It is not permissible. Then he says after that, في غير المعشر. Now when he talks about the hawl, that the hawl, the money has, a year has to pass on it, he says في غير المعشر. And he says here, to continue reading this part, he says أي الحبوب والثمار لقوله تعالى وآتوا حقه يوم حصاده وكذا المعدن والركاز والعسل قياسا عليهما. طيب, we continue. He says في غير المعشر. Now these are exceptions that the hawl does not have to pass over these things. Now we don't need to translate al-hawl anymore. So al-hawl is when the year passes, when a person has the minimum requirement of an-nisab. This is for everything except, these are exceptions here. So the exceptions, the hawl does not have to pass for the zakat to be wajib. That means it can happen before that. So في غير المعشر. This is the first istithna here, or the first exception here. What is al-mu'ashar? This is al-hubub wal-thimar. Right? Al-hubub wal-thimar is mu'ashar, meaning that it's mandatory to give from it the 1/10 or half of the 10th. That's what the meaning of al-mu'ashar. Al-mu'ashar from the 10th. So some things in the zakah you have to give either ushr, 1/10, or half of the ushr, half of the 10th, which is the hubub wa thimar, which is al-hubub wa thimar, the grains and the produce. So in the grain and the produce, it does not have to be that a hawl passes. So what's the cutoff time for the zakat to be given is وَآتُوا حَقَّهُ يَوْمَ حَصَادِهِ, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, لِقَوْلِهِ تَعَالَى وَآتُوا حَقَّهُ يَوْمَ حَصَادِهِ. Give its rights, which is the zakat, on the day of its hasad, in the day of its harvesting, in the harvesting day. So the day of harvesting, this is where the zakah is to be given. Doesn't have to be then waiting for a year. And if you look at the al-amwal al-zakawiyya, the wealth that is required to give zakah from. Again, to look at it from the perspective that its amwal has nama in it. The wealth in itself increases. So the completion of the increase of something like al-hubub wa thimar, the grains and the produce, ends by the end of the year, and ends by the hasad, by the harvesting, not the end of the year. It's when it's harvested. And so this is al-hasad, especially after it's harvested and it's put in the place where they store it there. So then once it's there, then the zakah becomes mandatory on that day. So this is basically, as he says, في غير المعشر. That means al-mu'ashar, you don't have to wait for a year. Actually, it's not like you don't have to. The obligatory time is when it's harvested. وكذا, also part of that exception that doesn't have to be, or does not wait for a year. وكذا المعدن والركاز والعسل. Right? So وكذا المعدن والركاز والعسل. المعدن is the minerals, which is other than the gold and the silver, of course. Anything that comes out from the earth. So any minerals, anything that comes out from the earth, this has zakah in it, and it's at the time when it comes out. والركاز are the treasures or the things that also discovered from under the earth that has wealth in it, and the asal or the honey. And the honey is when it's collected from its original place, not the honey that a person would manufacture or do in his home, and he has control over this. So this is with regards to the specific matters here. And al-asal, with the difference of opinion whether there's zakah on it or not. And we have to understand also, as it will come inshallah ta'ala, to differentiate between the zakah that is related to certain specific amwal, certain types of wealth, versus what it's been there for at-tijara. So for example, if someone has asal in his land, has beehives in his land, then there's zakah on it, regardless whether he sells it or he doesn't sell it. But if he's in the business of selling honey, then it's a different rulings here. Then it applies, the zakah ruling applies on it with urud al-tijara, with matters of trade. So he says, وَكَذَا الْمَعْدِنُ وَالرِّكَازُ وَالْعَسَلْ قِيَاسًا عَلَيْهِمَا. By analogy, with regards to the two, which is al-hubub wal-thimar, عليهما, this is the muthanna, refers to al-hubub wal-thimar. فإن استفاد مالا بإرث أو هبة ونحوهما فلا زكاة فيه حتى يحول عليه الحول. What does that mean? فإن استفاد مالا. Now this is something they call it المال المستفاد. And by the way, this is important to remember these things, these terminologies, because what is the zakah of المال المستفاد? And this is something that we need because it's applicable in our days so much. المال المستفاد, first of all, استفاد مالا. Al-istifada from, or al-fa'ida is the benefit. Istifada, that means he benefited, he received wealth. And what they mean by al-mal al-mustafad is that money or wealth that came within the year. So a person reached the nisab at the first of Ramadan. Before that, his wealth was less than the nisab. Now when the first of Ramadan came, he received, now his money is up to the level of a nisab, the threshold, the minimum requirement for the zakah. Then he waits for a year. There's no zakah obligatory upon him till an entire Hijri year passes. And then if the next first of Ramadan, or the last day of Sha'ban, the money is the nisab or above, then you have to give zakah. Right? So if zakah on what an entire year had passed on. So, but within the year, in the middle of the year, he received money. And that's what many people, they do. They have salaries, they have things that keeps on coming, and some money is spent, some money is received. So this is al-mal al-mustafad. So he says, فَإِنِ اسْتَفَادَ مَالًا, he received more wealth throughout the year, بِإِرْثٍ, because of inheritance, for example. أو هبة, or a gift, ونحوهما, and the like of that. Anything that a person received lots of money in the middle of the year. So then, does he have to give zakah on it at the end of the year that started already? فلا زكاة فيه حتى يحول عليه الحول. There is no zakah in this فيه, meaning أي في المال المستفاد, in this wealth that is benefited or received in the middle of the year or sometime in the year. حتى till حتى يحول عليه, till the entire year passes on it, this مال المستفاد. Right? So that means it's a separate amount of money. That's why it's usually it's a big sum of money that a person can put them aside or can recognize them, that this is something that he received, a month after he received the nisab. Then he doesn't have to give the zakah of this whole sum of money at the end of the year that already started. He can wait for a year for it that is specific for it. That means he would give zakah more than one time throughout the year, because now he have more than type of wealth that increased or has money. This mal mustafad doesn't have to be in the nisab, because you already have the nisab. So once a person hits the nisab, then any extra money that a year passes on it, he has to give zakah on that specific money. So now it becomes a difficult thing if, usually when they call the mal mustafad, someone is not going to inherit every day. So it happens once or twice or whatever. So it's easy to figure that out. But now when this subject is always mentioned with regards to salaries. So if a person would want to just to pay the bare minimum of the zakah, and he has already the nisab, he already have the nisab in his wealth. So the nisab comes in the first of Ramadan, he pays on that, or whatever whole year passes on. And then, the second of Ramadan, the year before, he received his salary. And that salary of it, that portion of it stayed, a small portion of it stayed for a year. He spent from it, and a portion of it stayed for a year. Then he has to pay on that portion that stayed for a year, that say the year passes when it was the second of Ramadan. That means he has to give zakah on the second of Ramadan. And maybe another day in Shawwal, every month, like this. So it becomes a very difficult task if someone wants to give zakah, especially that this is how his money comes in. He spends from it, he saves from it, things of that nature. So that's why, it's what is best. Either a person has a system that never fails and not to delay giving the zakah, and he can make a system for himself, or he has an accountant that he does that for him, or he just pay the money on the day of the nisab, the original day of the nisab. Then it doesn't matter how much money he received or he spent, as long as the entire year his money did not go below the nisab. So then after the hawl passes, then he pays on whatever wealth he has on that day. It doesn't matter what al-mal mustafad that he received before or he didn't. If he pays on whatever money he has on the day where he gives the zakah, which, as we said in that example, the first of Ramadan, he's safe. He's paying more, but he's not paying less. Right? So this is just to remember the subject of al-mal al-mustafad. And then he says, إلا نتاج السائمة وربح التجارة ولو لم يبلغ النتاج أو الربح نصابا فإن حولهما حول أصلهما فيجب ضمهما إلى ما عنده إن كان نصابا. Now there's an exception for the exception. Right? So this is إلا نتاج السائمة. Now we're going ahead. Why? Because these things will be discussed later, but just because the subject of al-hawl is mentioned. So now this is the exceptions again from the issue of a condition of having the hawl to pass for the zakat to be obligatory. But here in the al-mal al-mustafad, or the newly received wealth, as we talked about it, and it's very clear. But within al-mal al-mustafad, nitaj al-sa'ima. Nitaj al-sa'ima and ribh al-tijara. Nitaj al-sa'ima is the when the cattle gives birth. That's the nitaj of a sa'im. So a person has the nisab of the goats, and we will study it inshallah ta'ala, that the nisab of the goats is to have 40 goat or 40 sheep. In every 40, he gives one sheep for the zakah. Right? And it goes on till 120 and things like this. So someone had in the beginning of the year 40 goats. So that means at the end of the year, he has to give one goat as a zakah. But then within the year, he received, say for example, I mean, they gave birth and things like this. Now it became, say, 121 after the year. He started the year with 40. He ended the year with 121, which is the next level of in the nisab of the gold that he has to give. Now, after a year, instead of having 40, he has 121. But this 100, the differences between the 40 and the 121 did not pass a whole hawl on it. The year did not pass on all of it, just a portion of it. Only the 40 or that's it. Only the 40 passed the hawl. So does he give the zakah like the money? He would give zakah on the 40 only, and then he figures out what's the nitaj or the birth that came afterwards. Then he has to give it accordingly, like we just said about the wealth. No, this is exception to that case. Why? Because in this case with nitaj al-sa'ima, and the year passes when it started on the nisab, in that particular case, started with 40, then after a year passes, it was 121, he has to give zakah on the 121. That means he has to give 2 shah. So illa here is with regards to al-mal al-mustafad. Right? So this is illa nitaj al-sa'ima. Nitaj al-sa'ima, you have to give on the entire herd that he has after a year. It doesn't matter when did it increase, as long as a year passes and the nisab did not go below. His wealth in this case, the goats in this case, in that example, did not go below the nisab. Then he gives on the entire goats that he has at the end of the year. Hopefully this is clear, inshallah. The other thing is ribh at-tijara, the profits of the trade. The profits of the trade. So give another example. If a person has a trade, opened a business, opened a shop, selling car parts, right? And he opened that and it was well established in the first of Ramadan, right? And the amount of parts that he sells is beyond the nisab, over the nisab, right? So he has to give zakah after a year passes. And throughout the year, his trade, he buys and sells, and he always have maintained in his trade the nisab or more, right? So now he received more. Then he started with what was equal to the nisab, but throughout the year, at the end of the year, let's see, at the end of the year when he's going through the inventory, he has far more goods than what he started with, doubled, tripled, whatever. Does he have to go back and then follow the same thing with the wealth? No. Whatever at the end of the year, after the business started, he has to give zakah. It's an obligatory to give the zakah on whatever he has on that day, like nitaj al-sa'im. Right? Even though وَلَوْ لَمْ يَبْلُغ, as he says, النِّتَاجُ أو الرِّبْحِ. Even النِّتَاج. النِّتَاج again is what the animals gives birth to, the increase. أو الرِّبْحِ, or the profit throughout the year of the trade. Even if that portion of wealth that increased to him, even if it did not reach the nisab by itself. But already we have the nisab in general, he has the nisab and above for the entire herd of animals that he has, or when it comes to the tijara. But the nitaj itself, or the ribh itself, the profit of the tijara that increase, it doesn't have to be nisab or above. Why? فَإِنَّ حَوْلَهُمَا حَوْلُ أَصْلِهِمَا. Now this is the rule why this is the case. فَإِنَّ حَوْلَهُمَا, indeed the hawl of these both, النتاج أو الربح, the nitaj and the profit, both of them, their hawl is what? Is the hawl of the asl of it. Is the hawl of the asl. And the asl is the original amount. The original amount of the nisab. That's what it means. That means they don't have a separate hawl for themselves. They are added to the original asl, and that's why they are to be given zakah then at the end of the year over the entire thing that he has. So imagine the original way, the classical way of collecting the zakah. When the worker, he comes, the one that collects the zakah, he comes to someone's business. He comes at the end of the year. He started the nisab. He came to him in the beginning of Ramadan. Then the next year, he came to him in the beginning of Ramadan. He only looks at the inventory and whatever he has, goods that is ready to be sold. And all of that is to be included, and he would tell him, you need to pay this much amount of money of zakat based on what he sees today, which is after the year passes. He doesn't have to look at his books, whether he had less or more or whatever. It all upon whatever passed the year on, as long as throughout the entire year it did not go below the nisab. فيجب ضمها إلى ما عنده. So he has to add it to what originally he has, which is from the nisab and above. إن كان نصابا. All of that as long as it's nisab. Because if it's less than the nisab throughout the year, then you stop calculating the year. And he says here لقول عمر رضي الله عنه اعتد عليهم بالسخلة ولا تأخذها منهم. This is what Umar radiallahu anhu, he says to the man that is going to collect the zakah. Right? So he said to him, اعتد عليهم, that what you consider from them is what? بالسخلة, and a sakhla is the small goat that did not reach 4 months. Right? That means that is to be counted. اعتد عليهم بالسخلة ولا تأخذها منهم. Do not take the sakhla from it. Do not take the sakhla from the money or from the zakah. You don't take, because every 40 there's a share to be given. You don't take the sakhla. You don't take the small one. Right? So, and also it's mentioned from more than one of the companions, as it's mentioned then after that. ولقولي علي عد عليهم الصغار والكبار. عد عليهم الصغار والكبار. And Ali radiallahu anhu, he said also to the one that is collecting the zakah, count all of them, the small goats and the big, the small camels and the big camels, all of them to be counted. But the ones that you take as the zakah, you don't take the small ones. And he says, so this is where the Sahaba, they gave that ruling, and there's no differences among them actually in this mas'ala, in this matter, so it becomes clear. فلو ماتت واحدة من الأمات فنتجت سخلة انقطع بخلاف لو نتجت ثم ماتت. So now here, فلو ماتت واحدة من الأمات, if one of the ummat died, now a person has 40, and one of them died throughout the year, not the sakhla, not the small ones, but from the original ones that made his nisab. One of them died, فنتجت سخلة, and a sakhla was given, and another goat gave a birth to a sakhla, or to a small goat. انقطع. انقطع, that means the hawl is to be cut, that means it's severed, that means he has to, the nisab is not there anymore. Right? So he had the 40 from the beginning of Ramadan, and then after a few months, one of them died, and now he has 39. And then after a few days, one of the goats gave birth, so now they become 40 again. Right? So now, but the hawl has already been severed, it's been cut off. So we don't say that it's one, doesn't make a big difference. No. So it has to be 40, and an entire year passes. He says, which is different than بخلاف لو نتجت ثم ماتت. If it's the opposite, that means نتجت again, and intaj, by the way, is produce. Produce in the sense that when you have production, actually the word is used for production, for companies and things like this. But here, when it comes to animals giving birth, بخلاف لو نتجت ثم ماتت. So in the example that we just mentioned, in the beginning of Ramadan, he had 40, right? And then after a few months, an animal or some animals, they gave birth to one, for example. So now we have a sakhla, a small one. And then one of the original ones died. So now when a goat gave birth, they became 41. And then one of the original ones died. So now he has 39 and a sakhla. Now this is a case where the hawl is not لا ينقطع. The hawl is not cut off here. It counts. Why? Because it's a different situation here. Not that he lost the nisab and then birth, an animal gave birth to a small animal, no. It's already, it's been 40 and it added to 41, and then one of the original one died, then that means it's still 40. That's how the sakhla is counted. عد عليهم الصغار والكبار in that place, in that way. Um, actually, so يعني they're more with المال المستفاد. If you guys don't mind, we'll just finish it to the end of it. And if there's any questions, we can still repeat it, inshallah, next time. He says, وَإِلَّا يَكُنِ الْأَصْلُ نِصَابًا فَحَوْلُ الْجَمِيعِ. وإلا يكن الأصل نصابا فحول الجميع من كماله نصابا. وإلا يكن الأصل نصابا فحول الجميع من كماله نصابا. And he gives an example. So now what that means is, that means if with regards to المال المستفاد, وإلا يكن الأصل نصابا, if the original amount is نصاب, then the حول of الجميع من كماله, from the end where it becomes increases, is nisab. So what does that mean? That means it's part of the nisab, as we talked about it clearly before. He says فلو ملك 35 شاة فنتجت شيئا فشيئا فحولها من حين تبلغ 40. So if a person owned 35 goats or sheep, فنتجت, increased شيئا فشيئا, slowly one after the other. فحولها, when is the حول starts? من حين تبلغ 40, from when it reaches 40. Before that, it's not, the حول does not start counting the حول. وكذا لو ملك 18 مثقالا وربحت شيئا فشيئا فحولها منذ بلغت 20. And this is very clear, right? So someone has 18 مثقال, and the مثقال, and we'll talk about it when it comes to the ذهب, it has to reach 20 mithqal. And just remember that you don't have, what is that equivalent to what's today? It's okay. We don't have to know that now, inshallah. So the minimum for the gold is 20 mithqal. That's the unit used. So someone had 18, and then it increased gradually, whether he's doing trade or whatever, there's no zakah on it, till it reaches the 20. So وإلا يكن الأصل نصابا فحول الجميع من كماله نصاب. Right? So the asl, the origin, has to reach the nisab first. So, and the hawl of the rest is once it reaches the nisab. And then he says ولا يبني الوارث على حول الموروث. ولا يبني الوارث على حول الموروث. الوارث is who? Is the one that inherited, the one that received the inheritance, which is the heir. Al-Mawruth is the one that died and he passed on wealth. So someone received inheritance and it's, above the nisab or whatever. But this wealth, when it was in the ownership of his father, for example, before he died, he had a month left to give zakah on it. The zakah was not obligatory yet upon his father that just died. It was still a month left. And now the money becomes in the ownership of his son. So then we start a new hawl for the son. A new hawl is to start for the son, for the warith, for the heir. He does not yabni, he does not add on the hawl of the mawruth or the one that passed away. Clear? Now it's a different dhimma, different ownership of the wealth. He says ويضم المستفاد إلى نصاب بيده من جنسه أو في حكمه. So here ويضم المستفاد إلى نصاب بيده. Now it's this is المال المستفاد again. يضم المستفاد. He add the mustafad, he add what is extra money that he received throughout the year إلى نصاب, to the original nisab that he has, بيده, that he has in his ownership, من جنسه أو في حكمه. من جنسه. That means if the nisab of the money, he had the minimum requirement for the nisab of the money, and he received more money throughout the year in his business, in his trade, that's to be added to the same kind. So money with money. gold with gold, silver with silver. أو في حكمه, or the حكم of it. The حكم of it, that means the gold is the same حكم as the money. So you don't have to say money added to money, gold as added to gold, because it's the is the same. And the same thing with the silver. So the money and the gold and the silver, the nisab is together. I mean, of course, with the money and the gold. The silver has its separate how the separate nisab for the silver, right? So you don't add them all together, goats and sheep and gold and silver and money. So only the ones that has the same hukm. So the gold is to be added to the silver. And al-urud, if they're all means of tijara, he sells all kinds of things, then they all are urud al-tijara. If someone sells goats and sheep and sells car parts, and it's all in the same business, then we don't say what's the nisab of the goats and sheep versus the nisab of gold and silver. No, all of them has the same nisab, because they're all under the urud al-tijara, under the trade, not the nisab of these separate things when it's not for trade, right? So this is ويضم المستفاد إلى نصاب بيده من جنسه أو في حكمه, whether in from its kind to be according to its kind, or what is in the ruling of it. أو في حكمه, so whether it's each kind on its own, or they share the same ruling together. Or they share the same ruling together, that means they are to be given together. Then he says ويزكي كل واحد إذا تم حوله. Now he gives the zakah for each one because of a different kind. So the zakah of the wealth and gold and silver together, because they have the same hukm. The zakah of the goats and sheep, they are to be given the zakah when its hawl passes, because they're a different hukm for it. But if you remember that example that I mentioned, it's not to make it difficult, but it's to understand the subject here. If عروض التجارة, then عروض التجارة, gold and silver, and money with it, and things of that nature, to be separated with its different hawl. Hopefully, inshallah ta'ala, this is clear. And if it's not, read it over again, inshallah, and see how things are. And again, if you see that it's not, inshallah, overwhelming, but if it's difficult, if you see it's so easy, that means we're doing something wrong. Right? It has to be challenging, not difficult, but challenging. When you read the matn and you go over it again and you see the dama'ir and you understand the masail, and you go back again, but make sure that you make it clear for yourself. Right? And then, and of course, when we talked about this chapter of the salah, we make salah, so we understand how the salah is and things like this. But when it comes to the zakah, many of these masail, we don't have it practiced in our daily life. So sometimes it's difficult to understand it from the first time, inshallah. But inshallah ta'ala, hopefully it's clear with what is being mentioned. Right? If you have any questions or anything that is not clear, inshallah. Barakallahu feekum. Ameen. Allah reward you. Jazakumullah khair. The treasures, plants, honey, cattle, and minerals, do they have zakah on them at all times, or only at the time of nisab? Only at the time of the nisab, that's the zakah on it, as the zakah of a rikaz, which is a special portion to be given. But then once a person, he has it in his ownership, and then a year passes, you don't give the zakah after a year on the rikaz, on the treasure. You give zakah on gold and silver and money, which is a different amount of zakah to be given. Now, would it be anyone who plants any plants, or has Allah? It has the plants or the hubub or the grains has to reach the minimum requirement of the nisab, that we didn't talk about it yet. So after it's harvested, it has to be more than what the nisab is. And then the zakah is to be given on the day of harvesting. Then he has this amount of grains. Right now it becomes in his ownership. But there's no zakah on it anymore. But he sells, it's to be used. If he's in the business of selling them, then after a year, then it becomes part of urud al-tijara, or the things that trade, that it's a separate zakah. What about if your home you live in becomes a rental property? Do we pay money on the house itself? Is the house zakah due when it becomes a sale? Does the intention matter more than what the legal contract it has to be? What about transfer of property, say from the father to his son, while he is alive, he's zakah due upon it? The rental properties, there's no zakah on the property itself. Is the money that is received for rent from renting. Then if a person's spend it all, there's no zakah. If he saves it, then he deals with it with his the rest of his money. But the original property, there's no zakah on it on a yearly basis, unless then the house or the rented property is to be for sale. And once a person put it for sale, and a year passes and he didn't sell it, then he has to give zakah on what it's worth if it gets sold today. The amount of money that he would receive, if he put that price on it, people will buy it today. Not the money that he's seeking, right? So then if it's for sale, does it matter? The intentions meaning that now this house is for sale and he takes the means. Right. Yes, is the intention matter here in this case. And not the legal contract. The intention that now I have this for sale, that means it becomes money that he put aside. Now, even if he's not openly marketing for the house. And transferring property, as long as it's not for a person to run away from giving zakah, then it's the son's ownership. But is it really ownership or just writing the name so that people would use it after he dies? That's a serious matter, because what is written in the contract is what really is, and intention here does not matter. We have to be careful. If someone writes a house in the name of his son, and in his intention, this is my son's house, but not in my life after the father dies, that's not permissible to start with, because inheritance has to take care of this matter. But and in that case, no, the house is in the ownership of the son. نعم. ويعفى فيه عن نصف يوم. That means the hawl is if it's half a day left, then it's to be considered. As I gave the example, if your zakah starts at the 1st of Ramadan, right? You have the nisab there. And then the next year, in the 30th of Sha'ban, the nisab is still there. Once there's only half a day left for the end of the 30th of Sha'ban, and a person, give a portion of his wealth away, and then the wealth become less than nisab. Does the year counts? Then yes, the year counts, because it's only half a day. If we have soap that was gifted to us and we don't know if the source of the soap is vegetarian or animal, what is the ruling on using that soap? If it comes from sodium tallowate, which is a rendered animal fat derived from cattle or sheep, which we don't know how it was slaughtered. Wallahu a'lam, the matter, these types of things is to be given the ruling of what's the norm. So if it's from animals that are not slaughtered and it's used for the soap, and many other ulama, they said that this is permissible, and it's only the pork that's the issue if it's known for sure. But if it's not known for sure, then if a person feels unease to use it, don't throw it away. Don't ruin it, but you can give it as a gift to his neighbor or non-Muslim or something like this. If an empty commercial property owned is advertised as for sale or lease, then how is that considered for zakah? Now, if it's not for sure for sale, then there's no zakah on it. So it's open for whether it's to be for sale or lease, right? So, but that means a person is open, right? So if it's let me take this back. If the advertising for it, as it's mentioned here, it's for sale or lease, and waiting for whatever customer comes forward, then it's for sale. This case is not that the doubt is in the owner's heart. It's already out for sale, and but it's not for sure. If a year passes, then the zakah is to be calculated now. But no. But there might be some issues with this, so let me let me look into this one, inshallah. Because if someone after a year passes, he did not sell it, but then he rented the property. Then someone gives zakat to a person in jail or detention for bond. We don't know if he will be released or not, and he has no family or help and is a stranger in this country. If it's something to release him from and means to release him from it's like a debt on him. Yes, it's to be given from the zakah if he doesn't have anything now. Allah. How do you know what should be given zakah on and what the nisab for it is? It is. Yes, we didn't discuss that yet. This is where we're just talking about the hawl and going ahead with some of the rulings that is going to be discussed later, inshallah ta'ala. So al-amwal al-zakawiyya and the details of what's to be given zakah is not yet mentioned. We're just focused on what requires a whole year to passes versus what's not. طيب بارك الله فيكم. Continue inshallah next time. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. سبحانك اللهم ربنا وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.